Hello, my name's Andrew Brooks. Welcome to my YouTube channel. This episode we're going to be looking at the taking of one of the most iconic album covers ever, Abbey Road. So thank you very much for joining me. Big hello and a big thank you to all the new subscribers, and if you're not a subscriber, all you need to do is just click this little button down here and it's free to use, and you will get to hear of any new videos of mine that come out. Okay, let's just clarify. Now we're over in St John's Wood, northwest London. Don't worry, I knew I was in the wrong place before. Abbey Road station is way over East London, nowhere near here. So if you check it out on the map, you will see we are a long way from the other Abbey Road. Just to let you know, I have been coming here since the 1970s, so I knew exactly where I was going, and I always love coming back here. So as I said, we're going to be looking at the taking of the Abbey Road album cover. We're going to look at the history. We're going to look at some photos as well. But what you need to remember is included in this video is a world exclusive. No one to my knowledge knows this information and has put it out there. So you have to watch to find out what that exclusive is. If you do decide to visit, why not pop into the Beatles coffee shop behind me? It's called Helter Skelter. They sell coffee to drink on the way to the studios, but they also sell some souvenirs. So why not pop in and have a look? The crossing and the studios are only a 5-minute walk down this way. So let's go. So well done. We've made it to the crossing. As you can see behind me, some of the motorists do get very annoyed with the tourists that are crossing. I've just seen Richard Porter doing one of his walking tours of the Beatles. Well worth a visit if ever you're over here. Just check him out. Very knowledgeable. So here we are at the legendary crossing. In fact, it is a Grade 2 listed building. Now, for those of you who don't know what a Grade 2 listed building is, it means it has some cultural or historical importance, and rightly so. It means it cannot be touched without local authority permission. I mean, obviously they can do it because they dug it up a little while ago just to do some road repairs. But yeah, you can't do big changes to Grade 2 listed buildings, and so that's why the crossing is still there, and it will stay there forever. So let's take a look at why this crossing was chosen for the album cover. Now, the recording sessions for the Beatles' 11th studio album began in February 1969, and they continued all the way through till August of that same year. And as the band sort of reached the end of their recording schedule and the sessions, their thoughts turned to what could be on the cover. Initially, they came up with the idea after seeing Geoff Emerick smoking some cigarettes, which were called Everest cigarettes, and they came up with the idea of calling the album Everest and flying out to Nepal to have some photos taken in front of the mountain. And obviously this was a no-goer due to their schedule. You know, the logistics of it would have been an absolute nightmare. Early in August 1969, Paul actually hit upon the idea of the band being photographed on the crossing just a little way from the studios. Paul drew a sketch on how the photograph of the album cover would look, and I have to say he's done a pretty good representation of the actual finished product. This would obviously have been the view that he would have seen hundreds of times as he walked from his house, which is about 10 minutes in that direction, walking that way, and he would have passed that crossing hundreds of times. In the days leading up to the photograph session, Ian McMillan actually came along and took a few sort of test shots. He did one black and white one. There's a new colour one which I hadn't seen before, but it's just been sort of unearthed. And also he did another one where he borrowed some people from Apple and the studios to walk across simulating the Beatles. So Friday the 8th of August 1969, it was a fine sunny day, much like today. It was quite warm, and the Beatles arrived at the studios uncommonly for them early in the morning. They were more of an afternoon, getting in at 3 p.m. Was when they would normally record, but today they were in nice and early because they knew they had to get these photos done. While they were waiting for Ian McMillan to get set up, the four Beatles, they just waited outside in the grounds of the studios that we can see here. In fact, they sat on these steps just chatting and smoking, and Linda McCartney was on hand to capture these four friends just relaxing, and the photos that you're now seeing are just phenomenal. At about 11:30 in the morning, the moment had come. Ian McMillan, he got the four Beatles to line up just in front of the crossing behind me here, ready to go. They were in single file. John stepped out first. He was then followed by Ringo, then Paul, and then George. The first three of them were dressed in Tommy Nutter suits from Savile Row, whereas George, he was dressed just in double denim shirt and denim jeans. Now, as you can see, nowadays Abbey Road is a really busy main road, but back in 1969, less traffic and also early in the morning, it would have been easier for the photos to be taken. However, Ian McMillan still did have to clamber up a set of step ladders to get the perfect angle that he wanted. Ian placed his step ladder in the centre of the road, just to my left, and using the pre-prepared markings that he'd done on his viewfinder, he was then able to line up the crossing exactly how he wanted it. After giving the word to go, the band then stepped out, led by John Lennon, across the crossing. So the first photo was taken, probably wasn't up to what Ian McMillan was expecting, as they were out of step and it just didn't look symmetrical. So Ian resets his stepladder, and once again the four Beatles cross the road, but this time from the other side, and they're walking back to where they originally started. Paul still wearing his sandals at this point. Although they were more evenly spaced than they were in the first image, they still remained out of step. Once again, for the third time, Ian McMillan places his stepladder in the middle of the road, climbs up and takes the third of the set of 6 photos. And in this you can clearly see McCartney now has already taken his sandals off. George appears out of line in this photo, and also there's been some traffic building up, and that's probably another reason why this one was rejected. So once again Ian has to move his stepladder out of the road just to let this traffic pass. And the Beatles reposition themselves, preparing for the 4th crossing of Abbey Road. For the 4th time, Ian McMillan climbs the stepladders to take this picture of the Beatles crossing. And once again, his shot is blighted by traffic. And as you can see in this one, it's in the shape of a big red London double-decker bus, the Route 59. Fortunately, by now Linda has also taken position, and she actually manages to capture the lads as they step off of the crossing onto, just about to get onto the sidewalk or the footpath. As you can see, the bus is just about to go past them. While doing some research for this video, I've actually managed to uncover some interesting facts which to my knowledge has never been reported before. I'm sure we're all aware of the story how Ian McMillan flagged down a passing policeman to stop the traffic to enable him to take the photos. Well, I'm going to blow that story out of the water. It's not true. Okay, I have done some research and I've found out that whenever the Beatles were recording at the studios, the local police station in St John's Wood would actually supply a police officer just to stay within this area, just to make sure there was no trouble from unruly fans. Now, on the day of the photo shoot, that particular police officer was PC Peter Binney. I've been fortunate enough to speak to Joe, who's Peter's son-in-law. Unfortunately, Peter is no longer with us, but Joe was able to fill me in on the story, because basically this is the story that Pete Binney has been dining out on for years, and he has relayed this to Joe over the years. So the story is, it was Peter's turn to come down here to look after the photo shoot. Now Peter was no stranger to the Beatles. He'd seen them many times before whenever he was posted down here, so much so that they actually knew him as Binney. Now Peter was running late this day, hence there's no police van in any of the first 4 photos. It's not until after the 4th photo that Peter arrives in the police van that you can see parked further up the road in the album cover. Once he's out of his van, he's running down the road because he's now realised this is where he's meant to be. And John Lennon's shouting at him, "Come on, Binney, you're effing late. Come on, hurry up." And Binney, usual banter back to Lennon, it was something along the lines of, "If you don't shut up, Lennon, I'm going to nick you." Now with PC Binney assisting Ian in taking the pictures, as it turns out he assisted with the last 2 pictures. For the 5th time, Ian sets up his stepladder in the middle of the road. The traffic behind him is now stopped by Pete, who's making sure that Ian is safely up his ladder. And it's this photo, the 5th photo out of the 6, that is the best out of the bunch. They're in symmetry, they're not in step. We'll come on to that later, but the symmetry is there, and they're almost dead center of the photo frame. So they carry on crossing the road, and then obviously Ian has to reset Peter, then lets the traffic go. So with the assistance of Binney, Ian McMillan, he steps out into the roads, climbs his stepladder for the 6th and final time. The Beatles then file across, and again, it's not the best photo. They're not in step, and it's just not as good as number 5. And finally, Ian McMillan steps down for the last time, and that's the end of the Abbey Road photo shoot. 6 photos, 1 almost perfect. Now, of course, there was another unofficial photographer there on the day in the shape of Linda McCartney. And as I said earlier, on the steps of the studios, she took some fantastic photos. But now, actually on the crossing, she's also taken some more. We saw the one earlier of them just after just before they were about to step off of the crossing onto the pavement. But she is also photographing them while they're waiting to cross. They're interacting with members of the public. They're sort of sorting their dress out. They're laughing and joking around. And Linda, fortunately for us, has captured these pictures for posterity and history. Another useful thing about the Linda McCartney photos is it totally dispels the myth that the crossing has actually moved, because you can use these photos to line up buildings, the actual junction of the road. You can line it up and you can see that the crossing is still where it was back in 1969. So I guess also we need to talk about the camera that Ian McMillan used. For all you camera geeks out there, it was a Hasselblad 500C, and apparently he used a Zeiss Planner 80mm 2.8 lens. If that means anything to you, I'm afraid it doesn't to me. As I said earlier, he had marked out on the viewfinder the outline of the crossing so he could frame it exactly how he wanted it every time he climbed that stepladder. Now, the camera was actually sold at auction back in 2020 for an amazing £35,000, and the markings on the viewfinder for the crossing were still there as well. How amazing is that? So what happened after the shoot? For that, we can actually thank Mal Evans, the Beatles radio, because he kept a diary and he notes in it how early they got there, and he also notes what they did afterwards. He's done a fantastic little sketch of the crossing, with the Beatles on it as well, so you can check that out now. So he notes that John, Yoko, Ringo and Paul, they all went back to Paul's house just up the road there for lunch, while George and Mal, they went to the zoo, which is about 10 minutes walk that way, London Zoo. Now, although the Beatles were finished with the photo shoot, Ian McMillan wasn't. Using John and Yoko's limo and their driver, Les Anthony, they drove about half a mile that way up until the junction of Alexandra Road. Here we have the junction of Abbey Road with what used to be Alexandra Road. Unfortunately, it was cleared in the 1970s-ish to make way for a new housing estate, as you can see there. Now, it was about in this location where the wall with the Abbey Road sign was actually built into the wall with the black tiles, and it was here where Ian McMillan decided this would be a great shot for the back cover, and also obviously giving the album its title. When he was lining up the shot, apparently the rumour is that a woman in a blue dress just happened to walk past, and he caught her in his shot as he was taking it, and he was very annoyed at the time. However, upon seeing the actual finished article, he actually thought it looked quite good, and he kept the woman in the blue dress as the back cover. Now, back in the 80s, there was one road sign left in the old style with the black lettering, and that was further up the road over the railway bridge that you can see up there. And I'm going to show you now a picture that I took in the 80s, and that was the last one. Unfortunately, in the 90s, that wall got demolished, and I'm guessing the people that owned the house kept the road sign. Now, the only indication that this was Alexandra Road is on this sign here, which is a sign for the estates, and as you can see, it actually has the name Alexandra. So we are in the right spot. Unfortunately, it's no longer here. Other than the band, there are several other people and iconic items visible. Firstly, let's look at the fifth Beatle in the picture. I am of course referring to the Volkswagen Beetle parked near the crossing. It belonged to a nearby resident called Malcolm Turner, and he parked it there regularly, but unfortunately after the album's release, and along with many road signs, his number plates, registration number plates, often got stolen for souvenirs by fans. We can see a gentleman standing just watching the proceedings going on, and he was later tracked down by a newspaper and was identified as Paul Cole, a visiting American tourist. And then down towards the studios we can see some decorators near the bus stop. Alan Finnegan, Steve Millwood, Derek Seagrove and Alfred Duffy all have memories of this day and are immortalised forever in history. Now, this photo has inspired many other musicians to copy it, the first being Booker T and the MGs. Their album McLemore Avenue was taken outside the Stax Studios in America. Others include Kanye West, the Red Hot Chili Peppers, and even the Police. No, not the band, I mean the real Police. Even Paul McCartney has recreated it for his album Paul is Live, and living just around the corner, he is often photographed crossing the road to the studios. And in fact, at one point he was nearly run over posing on the crossing. Guess we also have to address the conspiracy theory that the cover represents a funeral procession, Paul's funeral procession, as Paul was dead apparently. It shows John dressed in white as a minister, Ringo as a mourner dressed in black, Paul just in a cheap dead man's suit with no shoes, out of step with the others, and George dressed all in denim just as a workman, a grave digger in fact. The number plate on the registration of the VW Beetle next to the crossing actually has 28 IF. 28 years if Paul had lived, even though he would have been 27, so that really debunks that theory. Personally, I just think it's the product of someone's very wild imagination. Now, I mentioned John Koch earlier. He was the creative director at Apple, and he ran into trouble after the album was produced, because not only had he failed to put the album name Abbey Road on the front of the cover, he'd also neglected to include the word The Beatles, so people wouldn't know who it was, as if. George came to his rescue and just said to him, ignore Lockwood, he doesn't know what he's talking about, we're the Beatles, we can do what we like. In fact, John Koch said he only had one regret from this photo session, and that was he cashed the £700 cheque that he was paid to mastermind this photo session, because it was signed by Paul and John, and he regrets it to this day because it would have been worth a hell of a lot more than £700. So what is still here for the fans to visit? Well, obviously there's the crossing. You can have your picture taken like hundreds of other fans that I've witnessed here today. Just be careful though, look the right way. There are many accidents reported on this crossing. You've also got the studios. Now, unfortunately, the studios are closed to the public. However, they do sometimes have ticketed events, so keep your eye open, and you never know, you might be able to score a trip inside. Now, the crossing itself, obviously still in the same location, but bears a little difference to the album cover, and that's in the shape of the zigzags. Now, quite often, a lot of people ask me, what are the zigzags for? Well, they are what's called a controlled zone for the pedestrian crossing, and they were actually introduced in 1971. They provide a safe area for people to cross using the crossing, so cars coming along can see anyone who's waiting. So since 1971, if you park on those zigzags, you're going to get a fine and 3 penalty points on your license. Also located at the studios is a 24/7 webcam showing the crossing, so you can always check up on what's going on at Abbey Road. And something new is the Abbey Road shop, which is actually directly next door to the studios, and inside you can buy anything from souvenirs, pencils, rubbers to albums. Have you ever wondered what it was like to be a Beatle back in 1969, crossing Abbey Road 6 times for Ian McMillan? Well, let's go and find out. Well, hopefully that told you absolutely everything you needed to know about the taking of the Abbey Road video. Thank you very much for joining me. Apologies about the old pointing for the subscription button. I've got it reversed, so clearly if you want to subscribe, you just hit that red button. I believe it's in that corner. As I said, thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video. It was great fun making it. I do always enjoy going down to Abbey Road. If you can, I recommend a visit. Best times, okay, here's some tips for you. Best times, Sunday morning in the British summertime. You know, get down there about 8-9 o'clock on a Sunday morning. It will be fairly quiet, and you can then get some really decent photos. Just make sure you're facing the right way when you take the picture, so you're looking the correct way down towards the studios. And obviously, depending on which way you want to cross the road, the album cover way or the non-album cover way, you know, that's up to you. I'd also like to thank Joe Shields. He's Binny's son-in-law, for contacting me when I put out the appeal about did anyone know who the police officer was, and he contacted me. Thank you very much for all your information, and I hope I did Binny justice with my little thing about him there. And yeah, so thank you very much for that. And that's about it. I'd just like to say thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you next time.